This tree has to go. I'm just trying to think, like, what does the US actually produce that they export to other countries? Are there any, like, made in America stuff where you are, Wesley? Or is it all made in China? Apple. But Apple's made in China. Actually, that's interesting. Would Trump's tariffs affect Apple products? Given, if it's made in China, it's designed in America, sure, but it's made in China. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So then would the tariffs actually affect Apple products? Or would they still be the same price? And if it doesn't affect, like, Apple products, basically what it means is that the big corporations aren't really affected. It's only the American consumer who then has to pay higher prices. I mean, I guess not then, apart from cars that are mostly European anyway. Straight, I don't understand, and I'm not sure Trump understands either, the trade war. And what exactly is he trying to achieve? Two, 3, 4, and 5. Oh, you're right. It is a war. I mean, it's an economic war, but it is a war. You're right. 2, 3, and 4. It's, I mean, wars aren't that great, you know. They're not actually that great. China had a great war for many thousands of years, and mostly it did nothing. Let me just talk about my cultural experience. The experience of my culture with wars. The Great War is impressive, but it actually didn't do very much. It cost a lot of money, and it didn't do all that much. Like, it would only stop the smallest of raids. It is a nice tourist attraction, it is very impressive. Maybe it's finally making money for itself. Now that it's a tourist attraction, we can get tourist dollars to pay for the for the Great War. All those thousands of years of building the stupid wall, finally getting paid for it by the tourists. Which, by the way, the tourists means that we want people to come in. We don't want to keep people out. The war becomes an attraction for foreigners to come to see the war. You see the irony involved? It is the most ironic thing. Turns out tourism is good. You don't want to keep people out. You want to invite them in. a little bit worried that Trump is actually gonna destroy the American economy. I mean, for so many decades, the American policy has been to reach out and expand their influence around the world. On the one hand, it means that they have a lot of influence around the world, sure. But on the other hand, it also means that they've become... like, the economy has become tied to the world economy. And if they cut themselves off, or if Trump cuts them off, I mean, everything might just fall apart. I think these two trees have to go eventually. Let's leave them there for now. And then we ramp up a little bit here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2, 3, 4, and 5. I mean, like, previously the Americans, they spent so much time and effort basically building an empire. You know, and you know, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's probably a bad thing. But whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's outward looking. But apparently not anymore. I guess we do that there. 2, 3, 4, and 5. I don't know if we want to talk about Nazis or not. It seems maybe too serious for a Minecraft stream. But so the way I conceive of oppression is that it's... We have done it before, you're right. Is that it's not... It's like the hatred certainly enables it. But if it's just hatred, it wouldn't happen. Because like it would cost too much. Like the Nazis exterminating the Jews, for example. Sure, there's a lot of racism involved in that, but it costs so much money to kill all those people. Like, they dedicated so many people and so much resources into that machine that it only makes sense if they can profit from it, and which they did, because every time you murder someone or deport someone, you also seize their property, right? Let's say a Jewish shopkeeper gets on a train ride to someplace bad. Well, what happens to his shop? It gets taken over by somebody else, right? And because this person has no rights, they don't get compensated for losing their shop. They just lose it, and somebody else just takes it, right? So it's the money, basically, is what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is the money makes it work. I mean, hatred might make people angry and yell at people, But the whole system wouldn't really run if it didn't make money. So then we go back to what's happening in America now, like which parts of this actually makes money and which part doesn't. Presumably them deporting people who don't have a pristine immigration status, presumably it's a similar thing. Every person they deport, they will seize their property. There's also the prison industry where the government pays people, or the government pays companies to lock people up. And so then these companies profit from mass incarceration, but it doesn't benefit the society as a whole. So it's not really a sustainable thing to keep locking up more and more and more of your own people, because then every person you lock up reduces the productivity of your society. And at the same time, you're paying money to lock them up, and so you're kind of losing at both ends. And eventually you bankrupt yourself if you keep doing that. But they're doing it, the Americans are doing it. So they, presumably, by my logic, they'll end up bankrupting themselves doing that. As for the tariffs and things, I mean, a tariff is a tax, and tax, I guess, produces revenue, but only if they keep importing, right? So they put a tax on imports. If the imports continue, which they might, because, like, where are they gonna get all that stuff from? Like, if Americans want to buy iPhones, they have to import them from China. Whoa. Crazy. Everything's crazy. But if Americans want to buy iPhones, they have to import them from China. And so maybe their argument is that, well, the Americans just have to keep importing anyway, and they'll just tax them. What if Trump has a dark plan we don't know of and it unfolds on a later date? It's possible, Wesley, it's possible. But what I'm rambling on about now is that whatever dark plan it is, it can only work if it makes money, and he actually ends up being a little Martian in a human body. Maybe a big Martian. I mean, it's a big body, so maybe it's like a big Martian in a body. Maybe he does have a dark plan for a later date. Anyway, but the plan, whatever the plan is, it's only viable if it makes money eventually. Tetris says that would explain why he's orange, maybe. He's a Martian. Ah, right. The skin color is to camouflage against the Martian landscape. Which, by the way, the Nazis, I mean, they seized the property of the Jews that they murdered. But eventually, it kind of backfired on them anyway, because they didn't make that much money out of it. And they did spend a lot of resources trying to commit genocide. Which you would think that all those resources would have been better spent actually fighting the war. But yeah, this stuff is expensive. Like, enslaving people is expensive. And it only makes sense if it makes money on the other end, right? There's no point having a bunch of slaves if they don't actually then produce stuff for you to pay back the cost of you enslaving them. I mean, of course, slavery is also just evil, but it won't happen if it doesn't make money. Well, I mean, people might try it, but it won't work if it doesn't make money. To be honest, like, I'm less concerned by evil and more concerned by stupidity. I mean, maybe that's irresponsible on my part to say that, but like, an intelligent evil at least works. At least it functions. Whereas plain stupidity it just doesn't even function. But maybe evil is synonymous with stupid. I can also argue that. So they say that the tariffs are gonna cut into this quote-unquote economic growth that they were projecting from his tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. I'm just wondering if that's gonna be severe enough to put the US into a recession. Like if it will actually completely eliminate the growth. And it might. It's possible that might happen. I'm just wondering, like, how fast is it gonna come back at him? Oh, the tariffs with China. So he put another set of tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods, and the Chinese immediately retaliated with another 50 billion, like more tariffs on $50 billion worth of American goods. But if you look at their balance of trade, you will see that the US exports about $140 billion worth of goods to China, whereas China exports over $500 billion worth of goods to the US. Which means now 40% of US goods have tariffs on them, and only 10% of Chinese goods have tariffs on them. Fox says, I think that depends. There's going to be discussion on not applying to tariffs to certain places. Plus, I think the idea is to try to get companies investing in American production, but whether the two would balance out is another thing. Yeah, I mean, Fox, it sounds like a bad strategy to me. It sounds like they've... I mean, America is kind of copying North Korea, right? You close your borders, you become self-reliant or something. But in the history of the world, that has never gone well. Fox says, personally, I think incentive-based changes work better than punishment-based. I think isolationism doesn't work, Fox.